The camera slowly pans across Dr. Phil's silent studio, where the tension is so palpable it seems to alter the very density of the air. Faces in the audience are frozen in expressions of expectation, while dramatic lighting creates sharp shadows on the central stage. The studio has been set up differently today. The guest seats are strategically positioned further apart, a deliberate production decision to create physical separation between people whose lives were, until recently, completely intertwined and simultaneously disconnected. In the center of the stage, an ordinary-looking, well-dressed woman sits rigidly in her chair. Linda Thompson, 52, maintains an almost artificially upright posture, as if she fears that any relaxation could trigger a complete collapse. Her perfectly dyed and cut brown hair, styled in a practical medium length, her well-manicured nails, and her navy blue skirt and blazer ensemble project an image of competence and normalcy that now seems like a grotesque mask over the reality about to be exposed. Her eyes are fixed on the floor, and a keen observer would notice the slight tremor in her meticulously manicured hands. Before we delve into this shocking story, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. And please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what you thought of this case. Your opinion is crucial for us to continue bringing you heartwarming content. To her right, separated by several empty chairs that seem to emphasize the emotional chasm between them, sits Robert Thompson, 55, tall and broad-shouldered, with the physique of someone who has spent his life working hard. Robert's face is flushed with a contained rage that threatens to erupt at any moment. His large hands are clenched into fists on his knees, his knuckles white with tension. He occasionally glances in Linda's direction, a mixture of contempt, pain, and profound confusion. To Linda's left, also separated by empty chairs, is Michael Wilson, 54. Slimmer than Robert, with thin-rimmed glasses and a countenance that suggests a more intellectual life, Michael displays an expression of utter disbelief. From time to time, he removes his glasses and rubs his eyes, as if trying to wake from a particularly vivid nightmare. His posture is slightly hunched, as if he were carrying a new and unbearable weight. The silent audience watches as Dr. Phil, standing among them, takes a deep breath before continuing. His face, so familiar to millions of viewers, displays a mixture of professional compassion and genuine indignation, a combination he has honed over decades of televised confrontations with baffling human behavior. For the whole decades, you maintained to homes, to husbands, and to completely different sets of children, says Dr. Phil, his voice calm but heavy with disbelief. And neither of these families knew of the other's existence. Am I correct? Linda nods slightly, unable to look up. On the giant screens behind them, a meticulously arranged slideshow begins. Linda at a family barbecue with Robert and their 3 children in Chicago. Linda at a graduation party with Michael and their 2 children in Milwaukee. Same woman, same era, to completely separate lives. The images continue in a surreal juxtaposition. Linda blowing out candles on a birthday cake, surrounded by the Thompson family. Linda opening Christmas presents with the Wilson family. Linda at a Thanksgiving dinner in Chicago. Linda, just 2 days later, at another Thanksgiving dinner in Milwaukee. To decades of duplicity, carefully documented and now exposed under the merciless lights of Dr. Phil's studio, the audience murmurs in collective shock as the story begins to unfold. Linda Thompson has seemingly maintained separate identities for 20 years. Linda Thompson in Chicago, married to Robert, mother of 3 teenagers. And Linda Wilson in Milwaukee, just 90 miles away, married to Michael, mother of 2 young adults. Neither the families nor the husbands ever suspected each other's existence until 3 weeks ago, when a minor traffic accident landed Linda in the hospital, and the automatic emergency notifications called both of her emergency contacts simultaneously. Phil turns to Robert, whose fist remained clenched on his knees. Robert, how long were you married to Linda again? Robert clears his throat, his voice trembling with suppressed emotion. 23 years. Or at least that's what I thought. Now, I don't know what was real anymore. He pauses, visibly swallowing. We built a life together. 3 children. A house we completely renovated. We planned our retirement. For God's sake, Dr. Phil nods understandingly. And how many hours a week did you work? Robert adjusts his posture, almost as if he were in a job interview instead of a nationally televised talk show. I'm a civil engineer specializing in large infrastructure projects. I worked on construction sites that kept me away from home Monday through Thursday, sometimes even Friday, almost every week. His voice hardens. Linda used to say she understood that this sacrifice was for the good of our family, to give our children opportunities we didn't have. His voice falters on the last word, and he looks away from the cameras. All these years, Doctor. Phil continues, you never suspected anything? Robert shakes his head slowly. She is, extremely organized. Always kept meticulous records of everything. Detailed calendars. She knew exactly where I would be and when. Now I understand why. He laughs bitterly. She needed to know when she could safely be the other Linda. Doctor. Phil turns to Michael across the stage. And you, Michael? Was your situation similar? Michael nods, still looking dazed. I'm a pharmaceutical sales representative. I travel constantly, usually Wednesday through Sunday. Different territories each week, presenting new medications to doctors and hospitals throughout the Midwest. He pauses, nervously adjusting his glasses. Linda, or whoever she is, said she used that time to visit her ailing mother in Indiana. He swallows hard. A mother who, apparently, died 12 years ago, not 10 as she told me. The camera captures the moment Michael looks directly at Linda for the first time. Since the beginning of the show. 20 years. 20 damn years living a lie. Our children. What should I tell our children? That their mother is a... Michael, Doctor. Phil interrupts firmly. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But let's keep our language appropriate for television. Michael shuts his mouth abruptly, but his eyes remain fixed on Linda, conveying all the words he can't say on air. The camera's closing on Linda, who finally looks up. Her eyes are surprisingly dry. Her face a mask of forced composure that years of practice in keeping secrets seem to have perfected. I love them both, she says softly, her voice surprisingly firm. I still do. I loved and love all my children. That was never a lie. The audience reacts with noises of disapproval. Someone in the audience shouts liar, before being silenced by the production assistants. Doctor. Phil raises an eyebrow, staring at Linda with a piercing gaze that has made many guests crumble over the years. Linda, do you really expect anyone here to believe that what you felt was love? The question hangs in the heavy air of the studio as the lights dim slightly, marking the transition to the next segment of the program after a commercial break. When the lights come back on for the second act, Dr. Phil is standing, holding a thick folder of documents. The audience reacted to the intermission with a renewed murmur of excitement. The commercials allowed them to process what they witnessed, and now they are eager for more revelations. Linda, what we're uncovering here goes far beyond a few occasional lies or even a prolonged extramarital affair. Doctor. Phil begins, his tone now more incisive. You didn't just lie about visiting your mother or about work trips. You created elaborate stories, complex alibis, and even a second complete set of identification. He opens the folder and begins to pull out documents, displaying them to the cameras. Illinois driver's license as Linda Thompson, Wisconsin driver's license as Linda Wilson. Different social security numbers, different bank accounts, different credit cards, different medical records. He looks at her in disbelief. You even kept different medical allergies recorded on each ID. He pauses, looking directly at her. This goes far beyond a simple, occasional lie. This has been meticulously planned and executed over decades. The amount of effort required to maintain this charade is, frankly, impressive, albeit deeply disturbing. Linda straightens up in her chair, her shoulders adjusting as if she were assuming a new persona before everyone. It wasn't planned at first, she says, her voice now more assertive. I met Robert first, in 1998. We got married in 2000, had our first child in 2001. I was happy, truly happy, but I felt something was missing. Robert is a good man, solid, reliable. She cast a hesitant glance in his direction, but our relationship was mostly practical. Building a house, raising children, planning financially. She pauses, searching for words. Then, on a trip to Milwaukee to visit my cousin in 2002, I met Michael at an art exhibition. It was different, electrifying. He talked about literature and philosophy, things Robert was never interested in. Michael shakes his head in disbelief, but she continues. It started as something I thought would be temporary, but then I realized I couldn't end either relationship. Robert gave me stability, family. Michael gave me intellectual stimulation, passion. So, I didn't end it. The audience murmurs in renewed disapproval. Dr. Phil crosses his arms. So you simply decided to have it all, without considering the cost to these people. Linda continues, as if she needed to explain everything completely for the first time. Once started, it became easier to continue than to face the truth. I created systems, calendars, explanations. I became very good at remembering which stories belonged to which life, which friends knew which version of me, what gift I had given which child on their last birthday. And how did you explain the absences to each family? Asked Dr. Phil. I told Robert I'd gotten a part-time job as a financial consultant 3 days a week, Linda explains. To Michael, I said I spent half the week caring for my sick mother. She looks down momentarily. When she actually passed away in 2011, I pretended she was still alive for Michael. It was easier to maintain the story. Dr. Phil shakes his head, visibly disturbed. Linda, you have 3 children with Robert, Jason, Emma, and Sarah, ages 22, 19, and 16, and 2 with Michael, Daniel and Lisa, 21 and 18. 5 children grew up in homes built on lies. Linda looks down again. I love my children. All of them. I still love them. They received everything I could give. Dr. Phil leans forward. Except for honesty. Except for an example of integrity. Except for the truth about who their mother really is. Linda remains silent. How did you manage the finances for all of that? Dr. Phil asks, still holding the documents. To houses, 5 children, to complete lives that would cost a fortune. Linda answers calmly, almost as if describing a professional achievement. I worked as a financial consultant for several companies. The irony doesn't escape me. In Chicago, I said I worked 3 fixed days in the office. In Milwaukee, I said I did mostly remote consulting, with in-person meetings only 2 days a week. I earned well in both positions, about $85,000 a year in each. I organized everything so that there was never any overlap, and none of his employers or colleagues ever noticed, asked Dr. Phil, incredulous. I worked for different companies in different sectors, one in insurance, another in real estate investment. I made sure there was never any connection between them. She pauses. I'm very good with numbers and with people. I knew exactly how long each task would take, how much attention each relationship needed, how to optimize every minute of my days. Robert explodes while I was spending nights on construction sites, thinking about how I was building a future for our family, working overtime, missing school recitals and football games, all to give you and the kids a comfortable life. Michael adds, his voice breaking, while I was driving across entire states thinking you were taking care of your sick mother, a mother who, apparently, doesn't even exist anymore. Linda looks at the two of them. I appreciated your sacrifices. I really did. She loved them so much that she built an entire life separate from them, Dr. Phil observes sarcastically. Linda, at some point during those 2 decades, did you consider the consequences? What would happen when not if, but when that truth came to light? Linda hesitated. She knew it would be devastating, but with time, it became increasingly impossible to imagine telling the truth. How do you reveal something like this after 5 years, 10, 15? She shook her head. So I continued. Day after day, the camera captures the exact moment Linda opens her carefully positioned leather bag beside her chair and removes a small carved wooden box, approximately 15 centimeters long. The box has a dark, polished finish with small floral carvings on the lid, the kind of personal object that holds precious memories. There's something you need to see, she says, her voice suddenly firmer, almost as if she's regaining control of the narrative. Dr. Phil watches cautiously as she opens the box with a small metallic click and removes 2 identical sets of wedding rings. They aren't extravagant rings, simple gold bands, worn by time, each with a small solitaire diamond. I used to wear these alternately, she explains, holding the rings in the palms of her hands. When I was wearing one, I put away the other set. Every Monday and Thursday, she would exchange rings in the bus station bathroom between Chicago and Milwaukee. The silence is deafening as the cameras focus on the 2 identical pairs of gold wedding rings, symbols of promises that now seem empty. I began to think of them as symbols of different parts of myself, different versions of Linda that could exist in different contexts. When I put on Robert's ring, I became Linda Thompson, practical, maternal, organized. When I put on Michael's, I became Linda Wilson, intellectual, passionate, adventurous. Dr. Phil picks up the rings, examining them with an incredulous expression. He holds them up to the light, noticing something on the inner surfaces. His eyebrows rise as he looks closer, his face visibly changing as he perceives something the audience cannot yet see. My God, Doctor. Phil stares intently at the wedding rings and then at Linda, his face showing a mixture of shock and deep dismay that rarely shows through in his usually controlled television persona. Suddenly, he stands up, his body tense with a sudden energy that surges through the studio like an electric current. Stop everything. Stop recording right now. His voice is low but authoritative, the kind of command that leaves no room for questioning. The audience stirs, confused by this break in the show's familiar format. The producers rush around the studio while the cameras continue rolling, capturing this unrehearsed moment. Seriously, stop recording, Doctor. Phil insists, turning to the technical crew. We have something here that needs to be checked immediately. The studio descends into controlled chaos. The main lights come on, shattering the carefully constructed dramatic atmosphere of the program. Technicians whisper into their headsets. Producers exchange urgent gestures. It's one of those rare moments in live television where the unexpected breaks through the polished facade of the production. An executive producer approaches Dr. Phil, who shows him the wedding rings and whispers something in his ear. The producer visibly pales and then nods affirmatively. He turns to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short break from recording. Please remain in your seats. Our stagehands will be distributing water and snacks while we resolve a technical issue. Thank you for your understanding. The audience is politely ushered out of the studio, many glancing back curiously as they leave. The doors close, leaving only Dr. Phil, Linda, Robert, Michael, and a few essential producers. The studio, normally vibrant with energy, now feels strangely cavernous and intimate. Dr. Phil is still holding the rings, examining them carefully under the now brighter studio lights. Linda, he says, his voice now free of his television persona, softer but also more intense. These rings have inscriptions inside. Linda nods, something akin to pride shining in her eyes. Yes, they do. The same vows for both of you. 2 hearts, 1 soul, Doctor. Phil looks at the producers. This goes far beyond what we thought. It's not just a story of infidelity or a compulsive liar. He turns to Robert and Michael, who are completely disoriented by the program's sudden interruption. Gentlemen, look closely at these inscriptions. See the date engraved on each one. The 2 men approach hesitantly, as if afraid of what they might discover. Doctor. Phil hands over the rings, 1 for each man. They examine the delicate inscriptions engraved on the inner surface of the rings. Robert's eyes widen first, the shock evident on his flushed face. June 24, 2002. The day we got married. Michael pales at the sight of his own, his fingers trembling slightly as he holds the small metal circle that suddenly feels much heavier. June 26, 2002. Also our wedding anniversary. He looks up, meeting Linda's eyes for the first time with a new, horrified understanding. You planned this. You married us just 2 days apart. Doctor. Phil takes a deep breath, running a hand over his chin in a gesture that millions of viewers would recognize as a sign that he is completely reassessing the situation. These rings were purchased and engraved just 2 days apart. Linda, you didn't just fall into a double life. You planned this from the start, didn't you? Linda remained silent for a long moment, the only sound in the now empty studio being the low hum of the lighting equipment. I always knew I was different, she finally says, her voice now completely transformed, more confident, almost defiant, that I could love more than one person completely. Society says we must choose, that we must compromise a part of ourselves, sacrifice desires and needs to fit into a single monogamous relationship. She looks directly at Phil. I chose not to choose. The producers exchange alarmed glances as Dr. Phil sits down again, clearly reshaping his approach for the rest of the show. He gestures for one of the cameras to move closer, preparing to reactivate his public persona. Linda, what you did goes beyond an extramarital affair, he says, his voice regaining its professional tone, but now with a new intensity. You built a parallel and complete lives, knowing exactly what you were doing from the beginning. Do you realize that this could have legal implications? Identity fraud, potential bigamy, possible tax fraud. Linda interrupts him, her voice calm but assertive. I've consulted lawyers anonymously over the years. Technically, only one of the marriages is legally recognized. The second was just a ceremony, without official documentation submitted to the state. I kept separate financial records. I paid all my taxes, just not as a single person. There's almost a touch of technical pride in her voice, like a criminal explaining an elaborate scam. Robert and Michael exchange glances, the revelation triggering a new wave of betrayal. Which one of us is the real husband? Then, Robert asks, his voice trembling with restrained emotion. Linda looks at the floor for the first time since opening the box with the rings. You, Robert. Legally, I'm Linda Thompson. Michael rises abruptly, the sudden movement causing his chair to scrape across the studio floor with a loud thud. So our entire marriage was a sham? Our family doesn't legally exist? His voice rises dangerously, echoing in the empty space. Our children. My children. What does this mean for them, Doctor? Phil intervenes, standing up to Michael's level. Michael, I know this is devastating, but we need to remain calm to finish this recording productively. Your children are your children, regardless of the legal status of your marriage. This is something that can be addressed later with appropriate legal advice. Michael takes a deep breath, nervously adjusting his glasses, then sits down again, visibly struggling to maintain his composure. Phil turns to the producers. Let's call the audience back. We're continuing with the final segment. He looks at the three participants. Are you ready for this? They all nod silently, each lost in their own turbulent thoughts. The cameras are repositioned, the lighting adjusted again to the dramatic mood of the program. The audience is brought back, many clearly curious about the interruption. The murmur subsides as the lights dim, signaling the resumption of recording. Doctor Phil stands in the center of the stage, looking directly at the main camera with renewed intensity. What you are about to witness is something that, in 20 years of hosting this show, I have never encountered. This is not just the story of prolonged infidelity. It is the story of someone who methodically planned and executed parallel double lives from the beginning. With impressive premeditation and calculation, the camera pans to capture the faces of Robert and Michael, both now transformed by the full awareness of the extent of the betrayal they suffered. Doctor Phil turns to Linda, who remains seated with an unsettling calm. Which brings us to the most important question. Why? Why do this to these people who say you love them? Linda seems to carefully consider her answer, as if choosing her words for posterity. Because with Robert, I was Linda, the devoted mother, the wife who supported his career, who created a traditional and stable home. She turns to Michael. And with you, I was Linda, the adventurous partner, the intellectual companion, the woman who loved art and classical music. She looks at them both. With each of you, I could be a completely different and equally true version of myself. I couldn't give up either of those versions. The answer echoes through the silent studio. Dr. Phil shakes his head slowly. Linda, don't you realize you could have found a single person who would accept you in all your complexity? Yes, who would allow you to be both the traditional mother and the adventurous intellectual? Linda smiles sadly, perhaps, but that's not how it happened. And once this path began, each day made it more impossible to turn back. Each birthday, each birth, each family vacation, everything became another brick in the wall of lies I had built. Doctor Phil stands and paces across the stage, gathering his thoughts. What happens now to these families, to these children who have just discovered that their lives have been built on an elaborate web of lies? Robert speaks, his voice now calmer, but full of determination. I've already spoken to our children. They're devastated, of course, but we're supporting each other. Jason, our oldest, is furious. He refuses to say her name. Emma is in intensive care. Sarah, the youngest, still cries every night. He takes a deep breath. We filed for divorce last week. Michael adds, adjusting his glasses in a nervous gesture that seems to have become more frequent throughout the program. My children still haven't accepted reality. Daniel, the oldest, refuses to talk about it. He's immersed himself in his studies as if nothing happened. Lisa, my youngest, has been calling Linda every day, begging for explanations that make sense. Linda wipes away a tear, the first genuine display of emotion during the entire show. The hardest part is that I can't be there for any of them now. All 5 children I raised, whom I loved, whom I helped with homework, whom I took to the doctor, whom I comforted after nightmares. Now I'm effectively banished from their lives. Doctor Phil interrupts her firmly. Linda, you weren't banished. You destroyed the trust that was the foundation of these relationships. These are the natural consequences of your choices. He pauses. Do you have any real remorse? Not for the pain you're feeling now, but for the harm you caused these 10 people. Linda looks down for a long moment. I regret the pain I caused, but I can't say I regret the experiences, the moments of joy I had in both lives. She looks up. If that makes me a monster, then I'm a monster. The program is drawing to a close. Doctor Phil stands, addressing the camera directly, his face solemn. The studio is silent, the audience completely absorbed. Today we witness something extraordinary, not just a confession of infidelity, but the revelation of an entire life built upon meticulously planned deceptions. And this leads us to a fundamental question about authenticity and honesty. He pauses, his eyes scanning the audience before continuing. Many of us struggle with different aspects of our personality. We want to be adventurous, but we also crave security. We want to be intellectual, but we also value simplicity. We want freedom, but we yearn for connection. The lesson here is not that we should choose only one path, but that we should find honest ways to integrate all these parts of who we are. Phil approaches Linda, who remains seated, isolated in the center of the stage. Linda chose the path of division and deception. Instead of doing the hard work of fully accepting herself and finding relationships that could embrace all her complexity, she fragmented her life, and in the process, she fragmented the lives of 10 other people, her husbands and her 5 children, whose realities were fundamentally altered. He walks across the stage, his gaze shifting between the audience and the camera. When I stopped recording today, it was because I realized we were facing something deeper than we initially understood. We are not just witnessing the consequences of lies, but the tragic result of a life lived without authenticity. Linda never allowed anyone to truly know her, and that, perhaps, is the greatest deception of all, the one she perpetrated against herself. Dr. Phil returns to center stage for his characteristic closing. Authenticity requires courage. It requires facing the possibility of rejection, the possibility that not everyone will accept all parts of who you are. But without that courage, we end up living only fragments of a life, or, like Linda, multiple incomplete lives. Phil pauses for a final moment, his expression solemn as he looks directly into the camera. Be who you are, wholeheartedly, authentically, even when it's difficult. Because the price of living fragmented is too high, not just for those we love, but for ourselves. The studio lights slowly dim as the camera pulls back, capturing the final image to separated families, united only by the shared pain of betrayal, and a woman sitting alone in the center, finally without masks to hide behind, her face a complex mixture of relief and desolation, as if the weight of carrying their lives had been both a prison and a refuge.